Hi, and welcome to week 10 of English 2332. Okay, you've just turned in your second response paper. I'll get those graded and back to you as quickly as I can, and also we'll be posting the assignment sheet for the third response paper probably Wednesday or Thursday of this week. But your second unit exam is also this week. That'll be Thursday, March the 27th. 50 questions, multiple choice, A, B, C, D. It'll cover everything from weeks 10 and 9 and 8 and 7 and 6. So Sappho and Sophocles and Oedipus and Plato, Parable of the Cave, Petrarch, the Middle Ages, Beowulf, Virgil, Dante. I'm not sure about the Inferno. We may wait and study the Inferno for the next unit exam. Don't look for a whole lot about the Inferno on there. Okay, but that does give us a chance to, that provides a nice segue into the next part, which is the Inferno. Be sure you study that biographical information on Dante Alighieri, because unless you understand his life, you really can't understand his poetry. One important thing was he was a pretty famous love poet in Florence. He was born in Florence, Italy, and he was a famous love poet, a really good one. And he was also a politician. He was a magistrate, which is kind of like a cross between a judge and a city councilman. But he had some power, some influence, and he was a member of a political party which was at war with another political party. He was a Guelph. They were against the Ghibellines, and they actually went to battle with armies, and his side won. But then the Guelphs split into black Guelphs and white Guelphs, and unfortunately the black Guelphs won, and he was a white Guelph. So while Dante is out of town, they put him on trial for graft, barratry, which is the same thing, and just some other false charges with which he was completely innocent. But they tried him in absentia, which means while he's out of town, and they found him guilty. But they said, you can get back to town, where his wife and kids still were, by the way, and his property and his job and all his possessions and stuff. But they said, you can come back as long as you'll pay this hefty little fine. Dante thought that paying the fine would make him sound guilty, so he said, no way. He spent the rest of his life living off different friends, rich friends, big castles, and writing the poem that we're fixing to get into. All right. So you've probably heard this poem called by different names. It's most commonly called the Divine Comedy. He simply called it the comedy, la commedia, because of the type of poem it is. It starts off low and moves high, so the character movement is upward, and it's a comedy. Later, scholars renamed it the Divine Comedy because of its subject matter. It deals with divine aspects. Dante begins early on by saying, I'm going to try to describe something which can't be described. But then he goes on to describe it. He's trying to, in his poem, the first third of this Divine Comedy is all about hell, the Inferno. And as you know, it's mentioned in the Bible, but the Bible doesn't go into a lot of detail about what hell is. And so he's trying to describe this place of eternal torment and torture for people's actions on earth. But it's incredibly hard because it just can't be described. People read this poem and they say, well, I noticed he used a lot of Greek mythology or some of his own personal experiences or people that he knew. Yes, he did, because he's trying to describe the indescribable. The ineffable is the word for it. But it's hard to describe something using brand new or made up words, so he uses images that people are familiar with, like the boatman and the centaurs and the three-headed dog and like that, simply so that they can understand better what he's trying to depict in hell. And of course, in hell, it's people are punished according to their sins. In Dante's mind, in Dante's poem, hell is this huge funnel-shaped cavern which has all these different layers. It has It has 9 layers, but really has 10 layers if you count the upper layer, the surface, which is called, it's called the vestibule. I think of it as the front porch, the part you hit before you go into hell. And then the first layer, once you go down a layer, is called limbo, which we think of as a place in between, but limbo really is in hell in Dante's version. And then the further you go down, the more people you meet and the worse their sins become, according to Dante. Now, let's talk real quick about the characters. You need to know the characters, and I've posted a lot of information for you. I would encourage you to read over all of it, print out the parts that you think are important, and highlight them as you go through. For example, there aren't a whole lot of characters here, but 2 really important ones are Dante and Virgil. This is not Dante the poet. After this, or a little bit later this semester, we're going to read a poem by Chaucer, and he puts himself into the poem. He's actually talking about himself, but this is not Dante describing himself. Dante is, what, in his 60s or 70s when he writes this, and he's writing about a man who's 35 years old. So it's, plus Dante the character is younger, and innocent and naive, and Dante the author probably wasn't those things. But he gets to take a privileged journey through hell. Why is it privileged? 1, he doesn't have to be dead, which everyone else does. 2, he gets to stop and talk to some of the characters in hell. 3, he has a guide, that's Virgil, and he gets to come out alive. Now, Virgil, you may remember from before spring break, was that great Roman poet who wrote the Aeneid. And he was considered one of the greatest poets of all time, really kind of still is. But he was Dante's personal hero. And he picked Virgil as his guide. And again, not the real Virgil, because Virgil's been dead for 2,000 years. But he picks Virgil as his guide because since he's so familiar with him, he assumes most of his readers will be familiar, which, to be honest with him, they probably were. Another main character that we don't really meet until later on, well, we meet her early, and then we don't meet her again until the next book, but it's Beatrice. You might look at this and say, wow, there aren't a lot of women. Well, yeah, there really are a lot of women. In fact, Beatrice, St. Lucia, and the Virgin Mary are huge actors in this thing. Beatrice, following the will of St. Lucia and Virgin Mary, has asked Virgil to be Dante's guide. Dante wakes up on Maundy Thursday, which you don't know what that is, look it up. It's the day before Good Friday. If you don't know what that is, look it up. And he finds himself lost in a wood, and he's trying to climb out, and the leopard, the lion, and the she-wolf won't let him. Those represent his sins, by the way, or what he will admit to as being his sins. When you look at his life and you read this poem, it really takes on new meaning. But Dante says, well, you can't get out because those animals won't let you. So we're going to have to journey through hell, and then we'll come out the other side. We'll be cool. And they go through hell, and he explains what all's going on and who's who and what's what. And they get to stop and talk, and he explains some of the sins committed by the main characters, and some of the punishments, some of those are really bad, but some of them really aren't. On the vestibule, the front porch of hell, it's populated by people who didn't choose right or wrong. They didn't choose one side or the other, and so their only punishment is to run aimlessly after a blank flag. Now, in one version it says bitten by mosquitoes. All right, now, time out, because as you read this, you are going to get conflicting information. As I just said, some versions say they are bitten by mosquitoes, and some don't say that. This poem was written in Italian, not in the high, fancy, formal Italian, but in everyday Italian, the vernacular. It was written that way so that the ordinary person could read it and enjoy it. But when you're translating something from one language to another language and from one culture to another culture, you have to kind of work with it. You have to kind of massage it a little bit. And so if you read one version, read another version, they may have significant differences, but hopefully aimed more at helping you understand it better. Lucifer is one of the main characters, the devil. He lives in the city referred to as Dis. He is trapped at the very, very bottom of hell. And I always like this part. Spoiler alert, Virgil and Dante travel down through hell, boom, 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 down to this great funnel-shaped hell. And at the very, very bottom, they encounter Lucifer, the devil, the adversary, the enemy. And he's trapped in this lake of frozen ice or frozen emotion. And but but you would think, well, the ice would melt and he could get out. Yes, except he's got these great, huge bat-like wings, which he's constantly flapping them, trying to escape. He's trying to free himself from the ice. And if he would just stop flapping his wings, the ice would melt, but his pride won't let him stop. So he's trapped himself there. And Satan has three faces, and in each face he's chewing one of the three great traitors of history, according to Dante. If I can remember, they are Cassius, Brutus, and of course Judas Iscariot. Okay, the major, well, and then he gets out of, and we're just going to do a summary of these. He gets out of hell, journeys upward through the earth, arrives at Mount Purgatory, and then on up into heaven. I'll do a whole separate video on that later. But you got to remember what Dante is trying to do. He's trying to describe something which can't be described. And his mind can barely comprehend it, although he is a fantastically gifted person. What makes this a great poem? Well, first of all, the subject matter. He's writing about something divine, the afterlife, and he's using the vernacular Italian, and he's describing it in this tightly composed, carefully written tetrarima poetry that the poet, the words just locked together, and the rhymes and the lines and the meter, they're just all fantastically carefully written. And he obviously spent years and years doing this, but it turned out magnificent, perfecto. But he's trying to describe hell, what it's like after this life is over. If you do bad things, you get punished. And it's interesting when you look at his life, where he places the different sins in different levels of hell. For example, the top level, we already said, the vestibule, is just people who couldn't make a decision. Just below that are people who are good people, like Virgil, who's in limbo because he was before Christ. See, in their religion, in their religious community, their way of understanding the Bible, you had to know Jesus Christ. Well, how do you know Jesus Christ? If he's born before, if I'm born before him, how do I get to know him? Jesus in the Bible says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. But if you're born before him and you're a good person, you still go to hell. Luckily, you go to one of the upper levels and you don't get punished that severely. That's Virgil. Now, Virgil represents something. Virgil represents reason. What does that tell you about Dante? Dante feels that reason is the only thing, reason meaning intellect and the ability to understand, to comprehend, the ability to learn and to reason things out. That's reason. To him, that's the only thing that will get you through hell, is your ability, is your mind, your intellect. And so he has this guide, Dante, who knows all this stuff. He explains it all very nicely. He knows who all the characters are and everybody, and talks to them and explains it all very nicely to Dante and to us. But he finally gets him through hell, and they go down to this lake of frozen emotion where you got Satan down there waving his great bat wings with the three faces, chewing on the three traitors, and then they have to climb down his hairy back and out the other side, and yeah, so we'll get to that a little bit later. Anyway, it's a story of a privileged journey through a Christian afterlife. Let's see, I'll let you read about him. There's lots and lots of biblical allusions here, of course. Dante knew the Bible very well. Most of his audience did as well. When he was tried for graft and barratry and various other crimes, he was not only kicked out of the city, well, he was already outside the city, but he was locked out, and they said, if you come back without paying this fine, we're going to kill you. But he was also excommunicated from the church, which means he couldn't go to church, which means he could not be saved, which means he himself was damned to hell. And if you look at the structure of hell, you'll notice that about in the middle, he puts the people we think of as being really bad people. The murderers, the violent, the rapists, those kind of people are kind of close to level 7 or 8. But down at the bottom of hell, he puts the tricksters, the fraudsters, those who have committed fraud against other people, especially against kin, against family, against your boss or your master. And it's just a really fascinating thing. Yeah, the violent in circle 7. Anyway, take a few minutes to look over that. Let's talk about the major themes. Of course, one major theme is sin. What is sin? The journey, spiritual transformation, politics, poetry, and then entering paradise. An implied theme here, one thing that Dante warns us about, is the dangers of facile inferences. Inferences are conclusions that you reach with too little information. The word facile here means easy, but it also means too easy. So you've reached a conclusion too easily. You've jumped to the wrong conclusion for the wrong reasons. And so he warns us about basically jumping to the wrong conclusions, the dangers of facile inferences. This poem could easily be studied over the course of a semester or the course of a lifetime, really. There's just a whole lot here. All I'm looking for is just those few cantos outlined in the syllabus. You need to read 1 through 4, then 33. Gosh, that's not very much. Well, 1 through 4, then 33 and 34, and that's the very beginning and the very end. You're welcome to read more than that if you want to, but be sure to read the summaries and the handouts and the PowerPoints. Watch the videos that I've provided. It'll really help you understand it and appreciate it better. And of course, when you have questions, and on this, you really should have questions, please drop me an email. Let me know how I can help, and we'll talk some more later.